Ah, civilization. The Romans lived in villas, in cities. Medieval people lived in forests, in mud huts. The Romans had aqueducts. Medieval people got their water out of a well. The Romans had big, straight roads. Medieval people had dirt tracks. The Romans drank wine because they were so sophisticated. Medieval people drank beer because the water was too dirty. The Romans had figs. Medieval people had famines. The Romans had splendid bathhouses. Medieval people took baths once a year, if they needed it. The Romans had science and philosophy. Medieval people thought the sun went round the earth. The Romans wore pristine white togas. Medieval people wore brown sacks. The Romans had sanitation, democracy, education and grand architecture that has lasted 2,000 years. Medieval people used leeches, burned witches, caught the plague, emptied chamber pots out of windows and pooed in holes. Roman times look like Monty Python's Life of Brian, and medieval times looks like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Obviously the Roman period had technology and sanitation and luxury, so why did that all go away when the Roman Empire left? Why didn't medieval people live in Roman villas? Were they simply not smart enough to build underfloor heating? I used to work in museums that dealt with Viking and Roman history, and these are questions I would get from visitors a lot, but I was never really able to give an answer that I was satisfied with. People want a quick 2-minute explanation before they nip off to the cafe to have a sit down, not for me to just say a whole essay at them. But you're already sitting down, and I can talk for as long as I like. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Were medieval people more primitive than the Romans? And if so, why? Finally, as always, this is the London History Show, so we are going to be focusing on London specifically. Where there aren't sources about London, I might have to look a little bit broader at England and the wider Roman Empire, but if things happen differently in Ireland or Sicily or Byzantium, sorry, that's outside of the scope of this video. So, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. My monitor decided it doesn't feel like working today, so am I in focus? Am I in shot? Who knows? I guess you found out. Now, I'm not going to argue that the medieval period wasn't, a bit of a mud farm, because it was sometimes, but the Roman period was like that too. All those things that are associated with the medieval period, plague, the famines, the mud huts, they all happened in the Roman period. So, let's start off establishing our timeline so we all agree what order things happened in. Let's say the Roman period in London begins with Emperor Claudius invading Britain in 43 CE and ends with the Empire pulling out of Britain in 410. Now these dates are going to be different in different places, and of course some of you lucky countries never had a Roman period at all. But in London, that's generally what we're talking about. Medieval is going to be everything from then up to, and again this is pretty arbitrary, let's say the break from the Catholic Church in 1533, which in many ways signals the end of the medieval period. So it's a massive 1,000-year period. When I compare the Romans to the medieval period, I'm mainly going to be talking about the first 600 years of the medieval period, so up to the year 1066, which we can call early medieval. When I used to work with Viking history, which is a subset of early medieval, a lot of visitors looked at the recreations of Viking life and assumed that it must be before the Roman period, because we have an assumption that society always gets more advanced, and to them, Viking life looked less advanced than the Roman stuff. But Vikings are early medieval, centuries after the Romans leave. And let's face it, Roman life wasn't all it's cracked up to be either. Let's start with villas. We've all seen those incredible mosaics in archaeological museums, or those recreations on Time Team where they take one roof tile and extrapolate an entire CGI house. But those stone and brick villas are the only ones that have survived. That doesn't mean you'd be living in a nice villa if you lived in Roman times. Most people's houses were made out of timber, wattle and daub, just like medieval houses. Archaeologists actually find the remains of these kinds of houses all the time. It's just that you're much more likely to click on a news article with a big picture of a cool mosaic than one of some post holes. Dirty water. You think water wasn't dirty in Roman times? They couldn't clean it any better than medieval people could. In Rome, they did have a big sewer called the Cloaca Maxima, which was a great achievement and actually still works, but it drained into the river, which they used to swim in and drink from. And that's in the capital. Most people in Roman times lived in the countryside. Plague? There were plagues in Roman times. Maybe not the bubonic plague, but epidemics of unknown diseases that killed thousands of people. In 165 CE, the Antonine Plague killed millions and may have contributed to the slow collapse of the Roman Empire in Western Europe. But unless the Roman Empire is your Roman Empire, you probably haven't heard of it. You think Romans all wore togas and robes? Not in Britain, my friend. You'd be freezing. Plus, a toga is only for very important Romans, and there's just not that many of them in Roman Londinium. A lot of people would be wearing tunics and breeches, just like in the medieval period. You can even see some Roman soldiers wearing breeches on the Trajan column. Romans emptied chamber pots out of the windows too. In fact, they had to pass laws trying to stop people doing it because you couldn't walk in some streets for fear of getting hit. Okay. I'm not just going to slag off the Roman period for 20 minutes. I am also going to praise the medieval period. Chapter 3. The medieval period was pretty rockin', actually. Medieval people did build out of stone too, but somehow people never seem to count them. Maybe that's because we've still got loads of them, so they don't seem as special to us. But look at them! Look how tall they are. Look how much light can get into the building. They were building structures as tall as the pyramids, and 10 times as fancy. And medieval people had cool inventions that the Romans didn't. Like horseshoes. They seem pretty basic to us, but the Romans hadn't figured those out yet. Instead, they used the hippo sandal, which is a very funny name, but apparently hippo sandals are a bit rubbish compared to horseshoes. They're like slip-ons for horses. From what I understand, they're better than nothing. They do give the horse a bit more traction on a muddy field, but they can rub and the horse is going to want to kick them off, and they're not much good over long distances. There's little stuff like that, but there's also big stuff. Medieval people got rid of slavery. I mean, eventually. In 1086, about 10% of England's population was enslaved, but over the next 100 years, the practice died out and didn't come back until after the medieval period. Which, takes far too long, but at least they manage it. While the Roman Empire was absolutely a slave state throughout. About 15% of the population of the empire was enslaved. Enslaved people in the Roman Empire legally got worse punishments for crimes, including some truly gruesome execution methods. Crucifixion, being burned alive, or being torn apart by wild animals in the arena. I'd rather be a woman in medieval times than Roman times. There is almost no surviving writing from Roman women. You couldn't make wills or sign contracts unless you'd had at least 3 children. And look, the early medieval period's not amazing for this either, but there were women who ruled in their own right, like Queen Saxburg and Queen Elfthryth. God, I hate Saxon names. Elfthryth. Queen Elfthryth. And there were women who were powerful as the head of an abbey, like St Ethelberga. You could inherit property, write your own will. Under Athelbert of Kent's law code, you even got half of the estate if you left your husband. Medieval Londoners were a couple of inches taller than Roman Londoners on average, and they even lived slightly longer. So they must have been doing something right. So if you have to decide which period of the two you want to live in, the choice isn't as clear-cut as it appears. Like, okay, bathhouses are nice, but don't you want to live longer? But some things definitely did change for the worse when the Romans left. Those lovely mosaics and bathhouses and aqueducts did fall by the wayside, rather. Is that because medieval people were stupider? Is it because Romans were naturally superior, and without them everyone just wallowed around in their own mud for centuries? Is it because the poor are lost without an emperor to guide them? Chapter 4. What happened when the Romans left? Yes, I am incredibly warm. Let's hope I can do this in one take. Ugh. By the end of Roman London in the 5th century, trade routes to Britain were being raided, so not only were there not as many goods coming in, but the merchants wanted more money for hiring mercenaries to protect the cargo and for the dangerousness of the journey, which made the price of goods go up. And the goods themselves were scarcer, which made the price even higher. In 410, Rome was attacked by the Visigoths, and the Emperor Honorius wrote to the British states, telling them that he couldn't afford to look after them anymore, and that they should choose their own government and look to their own defence. So you've got all these powerful people in Britain who are used to deferring to Rome, but Rome's not in charge anymore. So they started fighting amongst themselves for the right to rule. So we got civil war as well. Fighting in the countryside made trading and farming unsafe. War closed the markets, so craftsmen stopped making things to sell at market and passing on their knowledge. Big fancy mansions were now targets for raiders, so they weren't safe to live in anymore. Moreover, people couldn't afford them. They cost a lot of money to upkeep. Roman Britain was torn into 100 tiny pieces, each run by a lord of a micro-fiefdom. These guys couldn't wield much control over their citizens' ordinary lives, they couldn't collect a lot of taxes, which meant they didn't have much money to spend on grand building projects or institutions. Bureaucracy collapsed. Without an empire sending you edicts and the chance of a good job in the bureaucracy, there was no point sending your kid to a fancy private school to learn Latin anymore. So the only people learning it were the clergy, which meant a lot of knowledge that was written in Latin couldn't get passed on. The Romans had a massive empire spanning Europe and reaching into Asia and Africa. They had trade links with a huge chunk of the world. If you wanted expert labour, you would probably be able to find someone who could put you in touch with a really fancy architect, say from Italy or Egypt or Turkey. You could import good building stone relatively cheaply. When the empire leaves, a lot of those trading links are broken. Don't get me wrong, goods from the Middle East and even China are making their way to England, but it's harder, slower, and more expensive. And there's less movement of people, although not none. We do have immigrants like Theodore of Tarsus, who came from Turkey and became the Archbishop of Canterbury, which means that even if you can import goods, imported expertise is a lot harder. That means it's harder to share and build upon knowledge. You're much more on your own. You could build a stone house in the medieval period if you want, but you might not be able to hire a guy who knows how to do it. You might be on your own. And if you're on your own, it's much easier to build a wattle and daub house than a stone one with mosaics and underfloor heating and that. I don't know about you, but I have no idea how to quarry stone. but I could probably make a stab at a wattle and daub house. It's also going to be so much cheaper to build out of wood than stone, because a boat can carry a lot more wood in one go than stone. In a time when you can't make as much money through trade, that's important. Without the empire, and with a smaller population, the economy wasn't big enough to support a lot of people who aren't producing food. When there's a famine on, eventually, anyone who's not making the absolute basics of life becomes unnecessary. It becomes unsustainable for your society to have lots of writers and merchants and makers of luxury goods and YouTubers. Instead, you have to focus on things that are necessary for survival: farming, blacksmithing, pottery, and defence. You're still smart enough to build amphitheatres and bathhouses and atriums, but you're spending your time doing more important things: growing crops and protecting your family and looking after your flock. So that's where society puts its energy. You see that in the development of things like horseshoes and horse collars, the new kinds of ploughs, the watermills that use fewer people to make flour. But archaeologically, London became practically a ghost town after the Empire left, for 400 years. In the Roman period, taxes were collected in the cities, and what with famine, plague, and attacking Saxons, the city was getting pretty deserted. The Victorians thought the early medieval period was so backwards that they called it the Dark Ages. And while that is a cool name, maybe they thought that because they hadn't done a lot of archaeology yet. They were mostly going by the lack of stone buildings and the lack of writing. Nowadays, we know that there were still links with Russia and Turkey and Syria, because we've found things from those places in the archaeological record. But if you're a craftsman making, say, pottery, then competition is going to be lower. If there's no one in London, there's no point sending your goods there to market, so you might just be sending your pottery to your local market, selling to your neighbours. It's not going all over the country anymore, so you're not competing with potters all over the country anymore. It doesn't need to be quite as good. Medieval people weren't biologically different. They thought the same as us, their brains were the same, they weren't less intelligent than us. If you plonk a Roman, or for that matter, a modern person, into medieval society, you'd be living in thatched roof cottages just the same. It's not so much that society went backwards in medieval times. For the vast majority of people, farmers, peasants, jobbing craftsmen, they just carried on doing their thing in the same houses as they always had. But the aristocracy couldn't build monuments and villas anymore. Roman landowners lost their land, and in Britain, Roman culture disappeared. And sure, if you have a gigantic slave empire that crushes rebels beneath its boots, then you can put together enough of a bureaucracy to sustain the kinds of armies that can build good roads. But is it worth it? I mean it. It's worth thinking about. On one hand, a well-paved straight road has all kinds of unseen benefits. Maybe the doctor that lives on the other side of the valley can get to your sick kids soon enough to save their life. Maybe you can trade easier with the next town and earn enough money to look after your disabled wife. How much conscription and slavery and bloodshed is that worth? It's like a historical trolley problem. These things cannot easily be balanced in columns against each other. It is the messy, complex business of society that we still struggle with today. In the 2nd century of the Christian era, the Empire of Rome comprehended the fairest part of the earth and the most civilised portion of mankind. The frontiers of that extensive monarchy were guarded by ancient renown and disciplined valour. Among the innumerable monuments of architecture constructed by the Romans, how many have escaped the notice of history? How few have resisted the ravages of time and barbarism? This dress is not staying put at all. Don't wear Hessian, kids. Yeah, there's like dog walkers coming across behind the camera as we speak. I really hope none of them look over and see me, because this would be hard to explain. And I have managed to get through it without spilling any bright yellow liquid on this pristine white Martella. I've covered up this thing with a bed sheet, so I just want to show you how nice my new white tie is. Show it off a little. Yeah, the tailcoat is old, but the waistcoat and the shirt are new. I think they look pretty good. It's quite hard to get one of these waistcoats that fits when you've got boobs, because they're not really cut for that. They don't. There's not many people who make women's ones, so you just have to sort of make do, and they often sort of gape here. But you can. There is a certain amount of sort of tightening up and things I might be able to do. Yeah, but I love white tie. I just wish I had more opportunities to wear it.